Hello guys, welcome to the AIMS series in which we will be dealing with the AIMS questions quickly and crisply year by year so that as your upcoming PG, ME exams are coming for the central institutes, you are there with no doubt in your previous year questions. So let's get started. The question number 1 is, a 2-year-old child is presenting with the watering of the eyes with bilateral proptosis and the photophobia. What is the diagnosis? So they have said that this baby, 2-year-old child, baby is coming up with the watering, that is your lacrimation, right? And also they have said that there is bilateral involvement along with the photophobia. So this much they have said, that there is photophobia, there is lacrimation, it is a baby, and we have bilateral involvement. Now this is an image based question, so you have an image in which there are certain things that you can see. So this baby is having the hazy cornea, right? We also have the megalocornea. This is also showing the megalocornea, because if you remember previously also I told you that if it is a normal size cornea, you won't be able to see the cornea up till the end. So there is a whitish area that is actually visible below the cornea. If it is a normal size cornea, then you are able to see this whitish area actually beneath the cornea or beneath the inferior limbus, and here you have absence of that. So we have a bilateral involvement, we have got a baby having a hazy cornea, megalocornea, and also we have photophobia, lacrimation, proptosis. So proptosis means the patient has the large eyes. Okay, so what is this? This is typically what you called as the buphthalmos. This baby is typically having the buphthalmos, which is actually the congenital glaucoma, where the baby is presenting with the BPL card. We have blepharospasm, photophobia, and the lacrimation. Now, out of this, they have already given photophobia and the lacrimation in your question. And if you look at the image, you can see the spasm here. So lid spasm is also visible. So that completes your classical triad that should be present in the cases of buphthalmos. Apart from this, we have the bilateral involvement. It's more common in boys. Now, though photophobia is the earliest presentation and lacrimation is the most common, photophobia is non-specific. So you require something more specific to make the diagnosis of congenital glaucoma. So for that we have got the hazy cornea. This hazy cornea is called as the frosted glass appearance. This is called as the frosted glass appearance. So that is also given. Now because this buphthalmos, the child age, look at the child age, it is 2 years. So what happens when it occurs less than 3 years? Then it actually leads to increased size of the eyeball. Whenever we have this congenital glaucoma less than 3 years, there is increased size of the eyeball due to the stretching of the sclera. So this stretching of the sclera leads to the increased size of the eyeball, okay, and due to this increase in the size of the eyeball, there will be increased size of the cornea as well. Increased size of the cornea, that will be called as the megalocornea. So this is also evident from your question. So we have got so many things which helps us to make a diagnosis of the congenital glaucoma. Now let's look at the options. Your options are A. Congenital glaucoma, B. Retinoblastoma, C. Megalocornea, or D. Congenital endothelial dystrophy. Now let's start from the option number D, congenital endothelial dystrophy. If you have this congenital endothelial dystrophy, I am going to expect the cloudy cornea and nothing nothing else. Okay, and you have got so many things. We have photophobia, we have lacrimation, we have hazy cornea, we have bilateral involvement, we have got the increased size of the cornea. So obviously this is not the answer. C option is megalocornea. Now if it is a megalocornea, there will be no haziness, there will be no photophobia, no lacrimation. So this is not a megalocornea. Then coming to retinoblastoma. Now what is the most common initial sign of retinoblastoma? Then I should have the leukocoria. Leukocoria along with the squint is the most common combination of the signs that you get in patients of retinoblastoma. Then further it is confirmed by the calcification. So if the baby is having retinoblastoma, I will not have photophobia and lacrimation. Rather I will have leukocoria, I will have squint, nystagmus, exudative retinal detachment, all these things. So obviously it's not a case of retinoblastoma. Now come to the option number A, congenital glaucoma. So very clearly the answer to this question is the congenital glaucoma. Next question, the pair of the spectacles shown in the picture are used for. The options are bifocals for the adult aphakia, bifocal glasses for the presbyopia, progressive glasses for the presbyopia, or the bifocals for pediatric pseudophakia. Now let's concentrate on these pair of glasses. Can you see we have got the bifocals. What do you mean by bifocals? Why I am saying that these are bifocals? Bifocals means that we have got the different power. In both the glasses, the power is actually different. This area will have a different power and this area will have a different power. This is the meaning of bifocals. So the above one is used for the distance vision, while this lower one is used for the near vision. Now this center area, this is actually called as the seam. This is the demarcation or the seam. So there is a seam present. Whenever we have got a seam present and you have got different powers present in the spectacles, and this is called as a bifocals, right? Now important thing is that this seam should pass through the pupillary axis. It should pass through the pupillary axis. That is very, very important. Now you may have the different designs here, like this is your intermediate variety. We can also have the D-shaped one or the semicircular one, that is also available. So these bifocals are there where you require the power for the distance vision and you have a separate power for the near vision. Look at the options here. The option number A says that these are the bifocals for the adult aphakia. Now if you are having a person with the aphakia, I will give just for the near vision. Then I won't give the bifocals. I will give the glasses just for the near vision, because you know, these are patients are having the hypermetropia. After the aphakia, the patients become highly hypermetropic. So these will not be the bifocals, they will be the plus glasses, right? Then come to the option number B, bifocal glasses for the presbyopia. Now if you are having the presbyopia, obviously I will give one is for the distance and another one will be for the near. So I am going to give the glasses for the presbyopia. If you see the option number C, progressive glasses for the presbyopia. Now we do not have the seam for the progressive glasses. Progressive glasses means that the glasses are progressing from one power to another power smoothly. So there will be no seam present. There will be no seam present in cases of the progressive glasses. Then option number D is bifocals for the pediatric pseudophakia. If there is a pediatric pseudophakia, what is happening? Pseudo means that already you have given the IOL. IOL is there for the distance. So we have already given the IOL for the distance. So I will give only the near correction. Now because I am only giving the near correction, that these glasses are again not the bifocals, as they were not the bifocals in cases of the aphakia. Therefore answer to this question is the bifocal glasses for the presbyopia. Alright. Next question, what is the angle subtended by the topmost letter of the Snellen's chart at the nodal point of the eye? The options are the 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 50 minutes or 30 minutes. Now if you remember, I always tell you that each letter in the Snellen's chart, each letter or each alphabet makes an angle of 5 minutes of the arc, which is considered to be the minimum angle of resolution at the respective distance. It is making 5 minutes of the arc, but at its respective distance. So topmost means 6 by 60. This will make this 5 minutes of the arc at the 60 meter. Then 6 by 36, next letter will make that 5 minutes at 36 meter. 6 by 24 will make the same angle at 24 meter, and it is so on. Now there was a confusion that the topmost letter is making 50 minutes. Okay, that 50 minutes that it is making is at the 6 meters. Okay, we used to calculate that numerical. What was it? We know that the topmost letter is 6 by 60. So this 6 by 60 is making an angle of 5 minutes at the 60 meter, which is the respective distance. So how much angle at 6 meters? So here we are decreasing the distance by the 10 times. Because I am decreasing the distance by the 10 times, so increase in the angle by the 10 times. Angle will also increase by 10 times. And what was that angle? 5 minutes. So 5 minutes into 10 is equal to 50 minutes. So your answer will be 50 minutes when they are specifically asking you at 6 meters. But they haven't here. They have just asked you what is the angle subtended by the topmost letter at the nodal point of the eye. So each letter is subtending the angle same, that is 5 minutes of the arc at the nodal point of the eye. Therefore, answer to this question will be 5 minutes. Alright. Next question, what is the most common eye manifestation in the Sturge-Weber syndrome? The options are glaucoma, keratitis, uveitis, and retinitis pigmentosa. So answer to this question is glaucoma. Answer to this question is glaucoma. Now we know that there are certain neurocutaneous syndromes which are called as a phacomatoses, and they are presenting with certain ocular manifestations. So if we look at the range of phacomatoses or the neurocutaneous syndromes which are presenting with the ocular manifestations, the one important one is your neurofibromatosis. In the neurofibromatosis, especially the neurofibromatosis 1, what you are getting the typical brownish nodules over the iris. So you should be able to identify them also. These are actually the iris hematomas, and they are typically called as the Lisch nodules. They are called as Lisch nodules. And what are these? These are actually the iris hematomas. Now because its name is neurofibromatosis, you are going to get the neurofibromas. They are present over the iris, they are present over the eyelid as well as the orbit, and along with this we have got the cafe au lait spots. So if you are having the cafe au lait spots, you are having the neurofibromas all over the body, especially the eyelid and the orbit, you are having the iris hematomas, then very very important is the optic nerve glioma. Optic nerve gliomas are also present. Now, though the congenital glaucoma can also be present in the patients of the neurofibromatosis, they are very very typical of the Sturge-Weber syndrome. Now look at the Sturge-Weber syndrome. Sturge-Weber syndrome is typically showing you the congenital glaucoma. So you can remember it with the SCH. SCH means we have got S for the Sturge-Weber syndrome, C for choroidal hemangiomas. Okay, so you can remember it as SCH. We have Sturge-Weber syndrome showing you choroidal hemangiomas, and C for also congenital glaucomas. Next is the tuberous sclerosis. Now tuberous sclerosis always presents with a triad where we have the adenoma sebaceum, we have got mental retardation and the seizures. This is a very important question that is asked in the pediatrics also. So all except question, or we can have which of the following is found here. What are the parts of the triad? We have adenoma sebaceum, we have mental retardation, and we have got seizures. Now what is the ocular manifestation? So you can remember it with the HRT, you know, hormone replacement therapy that we give after in the postmenopausal women. So you can remember the mnemonic HRT. So T for tuberous sclerosis and R is your retinal hematoma. So in neurofibromatosis, you are getting the iris hematomas. In cases of the tuberous sclerosis, we are getting the retinal hematomas. And then finally, we have the von Hippel-Lindau syndrome. In the von Hippel-Lindau syndrome, you can remember the mnemonic VAR. So you are getting the retinal angiomatosis. So sometimes we are having the choroidal hemangiomas, iris hematomas, we have retinal hematomas, retinal angiomatosis, congenital glaucoma. So these are the different kind of ocular manifestations which can be asked. And moreover, I think it is forming an important integrated question, because these kind of babies are presenting with the seizures, mental retardation, coming with some cutaneous problems, and then they are having the ocular manifestation. So whenever you are doing such kind of questions, always keep in mind that what are the important ocular manifestations of these babies. Next question, a patient comes to the AIIMS OPD with the acute pain and watering from the eyes for 3 days. So there is acute onset along with pain and watering. Then we have 3/2 mm ulcer on the cornea with the rolled out margins, feathery and finger-like projections along with the minimal hypopyon. What is the diagnosis? So they have already told you that it is acute bacterial, it's a acute keratitis. Why it is a keratitis? Because we are having 3/2 mm ulcer also, and we have acute pain, we have watering, means sudden onset is there. It's a painful condition, it's a sudden condition, it is presenting from 3 days, and we are having the rolled out margins, feathery projections. So there are certain things. So that means we know that it's a keratitis. Now what kind of keratitis? Bacterial keratitis, fungal keratitis, acanthamoeba keratitis, or herpes simplex? Now let's start with the option number D, whether it is a herpes simplex. Herpes, if it is a viral keratitis, then I should have the decreased corneal sensations as well as the presence of the keratic precipitates. Then if it is a simplex, then I should have the dendritic keratitis. If only I have got these kind of things present in my question, I can go with the herpes simplex. Now I don't have anything like decreased corneal sensations, no evidence of KPs, and there is no evidence of the dendritic keratitis. Rather they are saying rolled out margins with the feathery and finger-like projection. So it's not herpes simplex. Then come to the option number C, acanthamoeba. Acanthamoeba will be common in the people who are having the contact lens use. So you are not having any history of contact lens use, then it's a very painful ulcer. We have radial keratoneuritis, you have ring-shaped sepsis that is found. So it is not acanthamoeba. Now, most of the students get confused between the bacterial and fungal. They all know that the rolled out margins, we have finger-like projections, they are all presented fungal corneal ulcer, and then also we are marking the bacterial keratitis because it is giving a pain, and we know that in fungal keratitis, signs are always more than the symptoms, and therefore pain cannot be present here. So that thinking, that thought process is wrong. It is a correct statement that in the fungal corneal ulcer, the signs are more than the symptoms. Okay, and a same size ulcer, if it is a bacterial ulcer, which will be much more painful in comparison to a fungal corneal ulcer, well, fungal corneal ulcer will show you many more signs in comparison to the bacterial corneal ulcer. But this is also true that the rolled out margins and the finger-like projections are very typical of fungal corneal ulcer. So just on due to the fact that they have given you acute pain, you cannot rule out that the rolled out margins and feathery or finger-like projections are a feature of the fungal corneal ulcer and not the bacterial corneal ulcer. Then why does it has pain? Because many a times a fungal corneal ulcer may be actually combined, it may be superseded with the secondary bacterial infection. So those fungal corneal ulcers which are superseded by the secondary infection by the bacteria may also be presenting with the bacterial keratitis like symptoms like pain and watering, but the signs will remain same, that is of the fungal corneal ulcer, and that is why the answer to this question is the fungal corneal ulcer. So don't get confused. If you are having the typical signs of the fungal corneal ulcer, you have to go with the fungal corneal ulcer only. Coming to the next question, the below image signifies which of the following condition? Oculomotor nerve palsy, trochlear nerve palsy, internuclear ophthalmoplegia, or the lateral rectus paralysis. Now, if you remember, I always tell you that whenever you have such kind of a questions, always start with the middle image. So, primary gaze. Can you see this one? This is your primary gaze. When the person is looking right in the straight ahead position, you can very well see the ptosis. Okay. And the ptosis is occurring due to the LPS palsy. And LPS is supplied by the third nerve, so that makes an important clue that this person is having a third nerve palsy. Okay, now try to see the other things also. When we have everted this eyelid, okay, when you evert this eyelid, can you look at the position of this eye? This eye is going downward and outward. So downward and outward. Why we are having downward and outward? Because this patient is having the actions of superior oblique and lateral rectus. All of the following muscles are supplied by the third nerve except for which two muscles, the SO4 and LR6. So superior oblique muscle and the lateral rectus muscle, these are actually having the nerve supply which is other than the third nerve. Rest of all the muscles are supplied by third nerve. Therefore, we are having the uninterrupted action of two muscles. One is superior oblique and the lateral rectus. Now, what is happening? The superior oblique will bring the eye downward, while this lateral rectus will bring the eye outward, and that is why in the primary position the eye has become down and out. Now if you look here, when we are asking the patient to look upward, so this eye is not going upward. Why? Because this patient is having the superior rectus palsy. Superior rectus is supplied by which nerve? The third cranial nerve. Now if you see here, when the patient is looking in this gaze, okay, so this eye is abducting normally. This eye is abducting normally. Why? Because it has the right action of the lateral rectus. While if the patient is looking in the downward gaze, then what is happening? When the patient is looking in the downward gaze, this eye is not able to go that much downward because there is a paralysis of inferior rectus also. So we have the inferior rectus palsy, we have a superior rectus palsy, we have got LPS palsy. Now see here, when the patient is looking in the other gaze, so this eye is abducting, but there is no adduction in this eye. So there is a MR palsy also. There is a palsy of medial rectus also. And all these muscles are supplied by which nerve? The third cranial nerve. So very clear cut, the answer to this question is oculomotor nerve palsy. Now coming to the question number next one, that is tylosis refers to hypertrophy and drooping of the eyelid, inversion of the eyelid, senile eversion of the eyelid, or the distortion of the cilia. So answer to this question is the hypertrophy and the drooping of the eyelid. Actually what happens in cases of tylosis, we have got the thickening of the eyelids, and if you talk about the particular drooping is actually the ptosis. Drooping of the eyelid is called as the ptosis, but only this option is the correct one. There is hypertrophy at the margins of the eyelids. Inversion of the eyelid is called as the entropion. Inversion of the eyelid is called as the entropion. Senile eversion of the eyelid, that is called as the ectropion. Okay, while if I talk about the distortion of the cilia, so you can have the misdirection of the cilia. Now if the cilia are touching also, or they are rubbing the cornea also, then that condition will be called as, if you have rubbing of cilia. If you have rubbing of cilia, then that condition will be called as the trichiasis. Trichiasis. Therefore, the most appropriate answer to this question is option number A. Maybe there is some problem in the recall, because drooping of the eyelid is called as ptosis. So it is partly correct. It is the hypertrophy or the thickening of the eyelids that is called as the tylosis. Next question, a 21-year-old female presents with the glaucoma with the bulging cornea. Glaucoma with the bulging cornea, what is the most probable diagnosis of this case? Your options are keratoconus, keratomalacia, staphyloma, or granular dystrophy. Now if you look the option number A, keratoconus. Keratoconus is nothing but the conical protrusion of the cornea. So I will not have any glaucoma. There is no glaucoma in cases of keratoconus. I will have the oil droplet reflex, myopia, we will have astigmatism, we will have Munson sign, we will have the Fleischer's ring, but there is no glaucoma here. Coming to the option number B, keratomalacia. Keratomalacia is due to the vitamin A deficiency. Now, due to the vitamin A deficiency, we will have got the xerosis, we will have drying, we will have corneal xerosis, we will have conjunctival xerosis, we will have the corneal ulcer also, okay, and ultimately there will be xerophthalmia. Again, now this vitamin A deficiency is much more common in the infants and small children and not in the adult age group, and you will not get glaucoma in cases of vitamin A deficiency, so this is also not the option. Coming to the option number C, staphyloma. Staphyloma means you have got the bunch of grapes appearance. Staphyloma means that you have got bunch of grapes appearance. So this can be a possibility. What happens? Staphyloma, especially if I talk about the anterior staphyloma. What happens in cases of anterior staphyloma? Suppose there is a corneal ulcer, okay, and this corneal ulcer is going deeper and deeper due to the inflammation. So what is happening? If there is total perforation, all the exudates as well as the pus cells, they are actually organized above the iris, and because it is not able to withstand the pressure which is present due to the presence of the aqueous humor, it is actually pushing whole of this iris and the false cornea anteriorly, so it gives you a bunch of grapes like appearance. This is whole protruded anteriorly, so this eye will be, you know, bulging also, as well as there will be glaucoma also. Then look at the option number D, granular dystrophy. So again, this is not the answer. Granular dystrophy will not be having any bulging of the cornea or the glaucoma, rather we will be having the degenerative condition. Therefore, the most appropriate answer to this question will be the staphyloma. Next question, identify the pathology in the below histopathology picture of RPE. Now, what is found here? Can you see this is your RPE layer, and RPE layer is the outermost layer of the retina. So therefore, this layer will be your Bruch's membrane, which is the basal lamina of the choroid, and you have a lesion which is present in between. So what is this lesion? This is actually a drusen. Drusen is nothing but the extracellular eosinophilic deposits which are present between the RPE and the Bruch's membrane of the choroid, and they are very, very typically found in cases of the dry ARMD. Very, very typically found in cases of the dry ARMD. Now look at the options: the drusens, bipolar cells, basement membrane, or phagosome. So answer to this question is the drusens. Next question, which of the following is used as an adjuvant therapy for the fungal corneal ulcer? Atropine eye drops, pilocarpine eye drops, dexamethasone, or lidocaine. Now look at the options. Start from option number D. Lidocaine, it is a local anesthesia, so we are not going to use in cases of corneal ulcer. Then option number C, dexamethasone. Dexamethasone is a steroid, and steroids are contraindicated in cases of fungal corneal ulcer, so this is not the option. Option number B is a pilocarpine. Pilocarpine is a miotic drop that will further aggravate the ciliary muscle spasm, and therefore it should not be used in cases of the corneal ulcers. So answer to this question is atropine eye drops. Now why we are using the atropine eye drops? In order to give relax to the ciliary muscle spasm. So whenever we want to relieve the pain due to the ciliary muscle spasm which is occurring due to the corneal involvement, then we are using the atropine eye drops. So these atropine eye drops are used as an adjuvant not only in the fungal corneal ulcer but any kind of corneal ulcer. Next question, which of the following is the site of lesion of the internuclear ophthalmoplegia? Options are medial longitudinal fasciculus, sixth nerve nucleus, parapontine reticular formation, or the option number D is A and C. What is the site of lesion for the internuclear ophthalmoplegia? Now, for the internuclear ophthalmoplegia, your site of lesion is the medial longitudinal fasciculus. While if I talk about the both, because there is one more option where they are saying the medial longitudinal fasciculus as well as PPRF. So, if I have a problem, suppose I have a problem with the medial longitudinal fasciculus also this side and the PPRF also this side, then what is going to happen? Now, due to the PPRF, I will have a problem with the sixth nerve, with the lateral rectus. So there will be what you called as the abduction deficit. So same side I will have the horizontal gaze palsy, there will be abduction deficit, and this PPRF is also affecting the medial longitudinal fasciculus of the other side. So there will be the adduction deficit on the other side. Now if you look at this medial longitudinal fasciculus on that very side, so this will cause the adduction deficit on that side. So that means now what is happening? Due to this PPRF, you are having two defects. Same side you are having the abduction deficit, other side you are having the adduction deficit. Due to the same side medial longitudinal fasciculus lesion, you are also having the adduction deficit in that very eye. So that means what is the only movement that is left? Only movement left is the abduction in the other eye. So this is called as a 1.5 syndrome. This is called as the 1.5 syndrome and not the internuclear ophthalmoplegia. Therefore, answer to this question is the medial longitudinal fasciculus. I hope this is very, very clear. Next question, a 55-year-old male coming to the OPD with the complaints of the glare. During the night, he had underwent cataract surgery 1 year back. The best corrected visual acuity is 6/12 in the right eye and 6/9 in the left eye. No improvement with the pinhole. What is the most probable diagnosis? So this patient has undergone the cataract surgery 1 year back. So he may be having the late post-operative complications. This patient may be having the late post-operative complications, and the most common is the posterior capsular opacification, which is also called as the secondary cataract or the after cataract. Now they are saying that this person is having a glare during the night drive. Now if the person is having the posterior capsular opacification, he can be presenting with the glare. And they are also saying that there is no improvement with the pinhole, which suggests that there is no refractive error. If there is improvement, that means there was a refractive error, while if there is no improvement, that means the person is not having any residual refractive error. Now look at the options. The cystoid macular edema, pseudophakic bullous keratopathy, ARMD and posterior capsular opacification. Now look at the option number A, cystoid macular edema. Cystoid macular edema is also a late post-operative complication. But what happens? It is a macular condition. So if you give the pinhole, there will be worsening. There will be worsening of the visual acuity with the pinhole. Always remember what happens in cases of pinhole whenever you are giving any person the pinhole. So there are three things. If there is improvement, if the person is showing you improvement with the pinhole, that means the person is having the refractive error. Second thing, if there is no improvement, if the person is not showing any improvement with the pinhole, that means there is some organic pathology which is there in this case. While the third condition is that if there is worsening, so if it is rather worsening, that means this person is having some macular. That means the person is having some macular pathology. So if you look at the option number A, cystoid macular edema, this can present 1 year after the cataract surgery, but there will be worsening of the vision. So this is not the answer. Then the next is pseudophakic bullous keratopathy. Bullous keratopathy is actually a part of the vitreous touch syndrome. Okay, so if this person is having the vitreous touch syndrome, there should be actually the history of posterior capsular rupture, which leads to the vitreous loss, and this vitreous loss will lead to the vitreous touch syndrome. Then coming to the option number C, ARMD. ARMD is not related. It is not related with the cataract surgery, number one, and secondly, this is also a macular pathology. Now because this is also a macular pathology, there will be again worsening, so this will also lead to the worsening of the visual acuity with the pinhole. So therefore it is not the ARMD, also it is not the bullous keratopathy. So coming to the option number D, therefore answer to this question is actually the posterior capsular opacification. Now see here, posterior capsular opacification can occur as a late postoperative complication. There will be glare also, and there will be no improvement with the pinhole. Question number next one. The 5-year-old boy, he is brought with the complaints of the protrusion of the right eye from 10 days. With no history of fever. Now this is again very typical. You are having such an acute onset, he is having protrusion of the eye just from the 10 days, but he is not having any history of fever. So that means it is not an inflammatory pathology, it is not an infectious pathology. Now CT scan shows a well-defined mass in the orbit with the irregular borders and adjacent bony destruction. Such a short history of proptosis from the 10 days, no history of fever, then you are having a well-defined mass in the orbit. So you have some orbital mass, that means, and this orbital mass that you are having is having the irregular borders as well as bony destruction. So these both are the signs of the tumor. So that means there is some orbital tumor which is present in a 5-year-old boy that can present with the proptosis. Then look at the biopsy, shows small round cells which is positive for the desmin in the immunohistochemistry. So this you must be knowing that this is actually very typical of the rhabdomyo. This is very typical of the rhabdomyosarcoma, because you know whenever we have got the desmin, this is present in the muscle tumor. Rhabdomyosarcoma is a muscle tumor. So a tumor which is present in the orbit, which is present in the children, responsible for the proptosis, okay, with irregular mass, it is invasive, which is showing the destruction, and then confirmatory thing is your biopsy. Look at the options. We have retinoblastoma, cavernous hemangioma, orbital cellulitis, and rhabdomyosarcoma. Now retinoblastoma is an intraocular tumor, therefore you will not expect it to be presenting with the orbital mass, so this is not the answer. Cavernous hemangioma is found in the orbit, but this is actually common in the adults, so it is not commonly found in the 5-year-old child, so this is not the answer. Orbital cellulitis. Orbital cellulitis is a acute inflammatory condition. It is an acute inflammatory condition, and therefore we are expecting it to cause the fever, and we do not have any fever. Then there will be no bony invasion. It will be a benign condition. There will be no bony obstruction or invasion that will be present. So answer is not the orbital cellulitis also. So very clear cut, the answer to this question is the rhabdomyosarcoma. Always remember that if you talk about the tumors, the primary tumors in the eye, then always you have a clear-cut demarcation between the intraocular tumors and the intraorbital tumors. Intraocular tumors, intraorbital tumors. These intraocular tumors can be present in the adults or in the children. Similarly, the intraorbital tumor can also be present in the adults or in cases of children, right? Now, what is the most common primary intraocular tumor that is present in the adults? This is your malignant melanoma. This flowchart will help you solve so many questions. While in children, it is the retinoblastoma. Now, intraorbital in adults, this is actually the cavernous hemangioma. Cavernous hemangioma. And then we have got intraorbital in children. This is the rhabdomyosarcoma. Rhabdomyosarcoma, right? Next question, in the third nerve palsy, all are seen except. The option is pupillary dilatation. So this is the correct option. We will get the pupillary dilatation because it is the efferent nerve in the pupillary reflexes. When I talk about the pupillary reflexes, optic nerve is the afferent nerve and the this third nerve is the efferent nerve. Then next is the ptosis. This is also correct because you will be having the LPS palsy. So due to the third nerve palsy, there will be paralysis of the LPS muscle and you are going to get the ptosis. Option number 3, outward and upward. Now upward is wrong because you are getting the eye which is down and out. I just told you that eye will be down and out. Down will be due to the superior oblique and out will be mainly due to the lateral rectus. While the fourth is impaired pupillary reflexes. So this is again correct because it is the efferent nerve in the pupillary reflexes. So answer to this question is C, outward and upward rolling of the pupil. Next question, a patient is taking the drugs for the rheumatoid arthritis and has a history of cataract surgery 1 year back. The patient is presenting with the sudden painless loss of vision. What is the probable diagnosis? Now here they have mixed two things. First, they are trying to say that this patient is taking the drug for the rheumatoid arthritis. So that means he is on the chloroquine. So either he may be having some problem with the chloroquine because you know chloroquine can also cause the retinotoxicity. Secondly, there is also a history of cataract surgery 1 year back. So he can also be having the late post-operative complication. He can also be having the late post-operative complication of the cataract surgery. Now this patient is actually presenting with a sudden painless loss of vision. So that means we are having some posterior segment disease because sudden painless is mostly present with the posterior segment. Now what is the probable diagnosis? Now you don't have to think much because they have also given you an image, the FFA, and FFA is very clear cut showing that it is actually the flower petal appearance, and the flower petal appearance you get in cases of cystoid macular edema, and cystoid macular edema is the late post-operative complication of the cataract surgery. The options they have given is cystoid macular edema, macular hole, chloroquine toxicity or chronic choroiditis. So you don't have any thing like choroiditis or any evidence of hole here. So clear cut you have got two options, either it is a cystoid macular edema or it is a chloroquine toxicity. So they have given you a FFA, therefore very clear cut answer is cystoid macular edema. Now I will tell you, even if they are not given this image, their answer would be cystoid macular edema because you know that the chloroquine toxicity is occurring after 5 years of the chloroquine. If you remember, I told you that when you use the chloroquine for a very long time, that is 5 years, and that too in the doses that is toxic doses. If you are using this in the toxic doses, that means if you are using daily more than 460 grams, if you are using the doses that is daily, which is your more than 2 to 3 milligram per day per kg body weight, okay, or you are using more than 460 grams, that is cumulative doses. If you are using more than 460 grams cumulative doses, when you are using it more than 5 years, especially in a person who is having some liver toxicity or the renal toxicity, okay, then you are going to get this. So this person is not giving you any such history. They are just saying that there is a cataract surgery and the patient has started with the drugs for rheumatoid arthritis. So that means this is not the sufficient evidence to say that it is a case of chloroquine toxicity. Moreover, if they want to give you chloroquine toxicity, they should have given you the bullseye maculopathy. It is typically causing the bullseye maculopathy, and which is irreversible, but it is not occurring after small months. It is occurring after good 5 years. Therefore, clear cut the answer to this question is the cystoid macular edema. So I hope this is very, very clear to you, and if there is any doubt, you can always ping me up at any of the social media platforms. You can follow me on the Instagram and take advantage of the daily quizzes that we are conducting on the Telegram group, so that you keep in touch with the small topics of ophthalmology. It's really volatile, so it will help you in having an extra edge from others and also revising it well, so that you can come up in flying colors in your main exams. Thank you and happy ophthalmology.